that cold smile I'd been seeing more often lately, and said yes into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," David announced, pulling Madison close, "I give you the future Mrs. Cross. Finally free from dead weight." More laughter, more applause. I felt every eye in the room on me, waiting for my reaction. The corporate gossip crew, Madison's friends Jessica, Tanya, and Priya, were practically cackling near the bar. "At least he can code her out of his life now," Jessica shouted, causing another wave of laughter. I stood there, outwardly calm, inwardly cataloging every face, every laugh, every cruel comment. You see, these people had made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was broke because I'd been unemployed for 2 years. They assumed Madison was the breadwinner with her VP salary. They had no idea that the broke, useless husband was the silent majority shareholder in Cross Industries, the very company paying for this lavish gala. They didn't know about the $357 million in assets I'd accumulated from selling my IT startup, money I'd quietly invested through shell companies and trusts. I walked calmly toward the exit, ignoring the whispers and pointed fingers. Madison didn't even look my way as I left. She was too busy showing off her new engagement ring to her giggling friends. The valet brought my Tesla around. As I drove through the snowy Chicago streets toward my penthouse, I made a single phone call. "Rick? It's Alan. Remember that conversation we had about what I'd do if Madison ever crossed the line? Well, she just pole vaulted over it." Rick Martinez had been my best friend since college, an ex-cop turned private investigator with a dry sense of humor and flexible morals. "What do you need?" "Everything. Financial records, phone logs, hotel receipts. I want to know how long this has been going on and who else knew about it." "Consider it done." "What's your timeline?" "Fast. I'm pulling the trigger tonight on something that's going to make tomorrow very interesting for everyone at that gala." I hung up and pulled into my building's garage. Tony, the night doorman, greeted me with his usual nod. Tony was a former Marine who'd seen everything and judged nothing, which made him perfect for what was coming. "Evening, Mr. Foster." "How was the party?" "Educational, Tony." "Very educational." I took the elevator to the 40th floor, walked into my minimalist penthouse with its wall of screens and smart home systems, and got to work. First, I accessed my secure banking portal and began transferring assets. Joint accounts became individual accounts. Investment portfolios shifted ownership. The shell companies I'd used to hide my wealth began executing predetermined sell orders. By midnight, I had effectively withdrawn $357 million from Cross Industries and its subsidiary investments. Madison's company, where David was CEO, would wake up to a stock price in freefall and a liquidity crisis that would make tomorrow's business news very entertaining. My phone started ringing at 12:47 a.m. Madison's ringtone, Gold Digger by Kanye West, which I'd programmed months ago as a private joke. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By 1 a.m., I had 17 missed calls from Madison, 12 from David, and 6 from various Cross Industries board members, who were apparently working very late tonight. I poured myself a glass of Macallan 25 and watched the chaos unfold on my screens. My trading algorithms were executing beautifully. Cross Industries stock was down 18% in after-hours trading. The financial news feeds were already picking up the story. Mystery investor triggers Cross Industries sell-off. My secure phone buzzed with a text from Rick. "Holy shit, Alan. Whatever you just did, it's working." David Cross just left his office building, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Want me to follow him?" "No need. Let him sweat tonight. Tomorrow we start phase 2. I was settling into my leather chair to enjoy the show when there was a knock at my door. At 1:30 a.m., that could only mean one thing. I checked the security monitor and smiled. Madison stood in the hallway, still in her gala dress, mascara streaked down her cheeks, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd humiliated me 4 hours earlier. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Alan, we need to talk." "Do we? I thought you were pretty clear at the gala. You're marrying David. Congratulations." "You don't understand. It was just for show. For his investors. It doesn't mean anything." I laughed, a sound that made her step back. "Madison, I've been recording our conversations for 6 months. I have 47 hours of audio of you talking to your friends about how you're going to, quote, trade up from your, quote, loser husband. I know about the apartment on Lakeshore Drive that David pays for. I know about the weekend trips to Aspen. I know everything. Her face went white. How? I'm not the idiot you think I am. I'm also not broke. Check your bank account. She fumbled for her phone, fingers shaking as she opened her banking app. The color drained from her face completely. The joint accounts are empty. No, they're not. Your half is still there. All $47,000 of it. My half, the $357 million you didn't know about, is somewhere else now. She staggered against the doorframe. $357 million? That's impossible. TechFlow Solutions. Remember that little startup I sold 2 years ago? The one you said was worthless? It wasn't. And I've been investing the proceeds ever since, through shell companies, silent partnerships, including a controlling stake in Cross Industries. A controlling stake in David's company? Had, past tense. I sold it all tonight. David's company is about to become very familiar with the concept of a hostile takeover. Except there won't be anyone left to take it over. Just creditors and bankruptcy lawyers. Madison's legs gave out. She slumped against the wall, designer dress pooling around her. Alan, please. I made a mistake. I was drunk. I was caught up in the moment. David pressured me. Stop. My voice cut through her pleading like a blade. You humiliated me in front of 200 people. You let your friends mock me. You announced your engagement to another man while you were still wearing my wedding ring. She looked down at her hand, where my grandmother's diamond still glittered. You can keep the ring, I said. Consider it a parting gift. You're going to need something to pawn when David realizes he can't afford to keep you anymore. I stepped back into my apartment and started to close the door. This isn't over, Alan, she screamed, her composure finally cracking completely. I'll ruin you. I'll take everything. I paused in the doorway and smiled. You already tried to take everything, Madison. The difference is, I'm actually capable of following through. I closed the door and activated the security system. Through the monitor, I watched her pound on the door for 30 seconds before giving up and stumbling toward the elevator. My phone buzzed with another text from Rick. Phase 2 starts tomorrow? Phase 2 starts now, I replied. Meet me at the office at 6 a.m. Bring coffee and everything you can find on David Cross's financial dealings. The real ones, not the ones his accountants know about. I walked to my window and looked out over the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Madison was probably calling David, crying about what had just happened. Somewhere else, David was probably staring at financial reports and realizing that his company was about to collapse. But this was just the beginning. They'd humiliated me publicly, thinking I was powerless to fight back. They were about to learn that the quiet, unassuming husband they'd dismissed was actually the most dangerous kind of enemy. One with unlimited resources, no moral constraints, and absolutely nothing left to lose. I raised my glass of Macallan toward the window. Here's to new beginnings. I woke up at 5 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing like an angry wasp. 17 new voicemails, 43 text messages, and 12 missed calls from various numbers I recognized from Madison's contact list. Word was spreading fast through her social circle. The first voicemail was from Madison, recorded at 3:17 a.m. Alan, I know you're angry, but this is insane. You can't just destroy David's company because you're jealous. Call me back. We can work this out. The second was from David himself. Foster, I don't know what game you're playing, but you're messing with forces beyond your understanding. Cross Industries has lawyers who will bury you so deep you'll need a mining crew to find daylight. I deleted them all, without listening to the rest, and headed to my home office to check the overnight damage. It was beautiful. Cross Industries had opened down 27%. The financial news was calling it Black Tuesday for Cross Industries, and speculating about insider trading, corporate malfeasance, and possible SEC investigations. My anonymous tip to the financial press about irregularities in executive compensation and personal relationships had landed on fertile ground. Rick arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a thick manila folder. Jesus, Alan, I've seen corporate warfare before, but this is surgical. How long have you been planning this? 6 months of preparation, but I've been thinking about it for 2 years. Ever since I realized Madison saw me as a temporary inconvenience rather than a husband. Rick opened his folder and spread photos across my dining table. Madison and David at a restaurant. Madison and David entering a hotel. Madison and David shopping for jewelry. Apparently, my replacement ring wasn't a spur-of-the-moment purchase. The affair's been going on for 8 months, Rick said. But here's the interesting part. It's not just personal. Look at this. He handed me a bank statement. David's been funneling company money into a personal account. Small amounts, but consistent. About $50,000 a month for the past year. Embezzlement? That's what it looks like. And here's the kicker. Madison knew about it. I found emails between them discussing how to hide the transfers. I studied the documents. This was even better than I'd hoped. So when David goes down, he takes Madison with him. Potentially. But Alan, you need to be careful. These people are desperate now, and desperate people do stupid things. As if summoned by his words, my intercom buzzed. Tony's voice crackled through. Mr. Foster? There's a Mrs. Foster here, demanding to see you. She's pretty worked up. Send her away, Tony. She says she's not leaving until you talk to her. She's making a scene in the lobby. I looked at Rick, who shrugged. Might as well get it over with. Send her up. Madison arrived looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing the same dress from the gala. She pushed past me into the apartment, then stopped short when she saw Rick. What's he doing here? Rick's helping me with some research. You remember Rick, don't you? He was at our wedding. Sat at table 6 with the other friends you've been bad-mouthing for months. She turned on me, eyes blazing. You can't do this, Alan. You can't destroy innocent people because you're having a tantrum. Innocent? I laughed. Madison, you've been stealing from your own company to fund your affair. That's not innocent. That's felony embezzlement. Her face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Rick slid a bank statement across the table. $50,000 a month for 12 months. Transferred from Cross Industries' executive discretionary fund to David's personal account. Then immediately transferred to an account in your name. We have the paper trail. Madison sank into a chair, the fight going out of her. It wasn't stealing. David said it was part of executive compensation. Perfectly legal. Maybe, I said. But it's going to be hard to explain to the SEC when they start investigating. And they will start investigating, because I'm going to make sure of it. You're bluffing. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. SEC tip line? I'd like to report suspicious financial activity at Cross Industries, executive embezzlement, and possible securities fraud. Madison lunged for the phone, but Rick caught her wrist. I wouldn't, he said quietly. I gave the SEC operator David's name, the account numbers Rick had found, and a detailed summary of the financial irregularities. The whole conversation took 5 minutes. When I hung up, Madison was crying. Why are you doing this to me? I loved you once. Once, past tense. But you humiliated me in front of 200 people, Madison. You announced your engagement to another man while you were still married to me. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? It was a mistake. I was drunk. I was caught up in the moment. You were sober when you signed the lease on that Lakeshore Drive apartment. You were sober when you opened that bank account. You were sober when you told Jessica that you were trading up from dead weight. She looked up sharply. You were listening to my phone calls? I didn't have to. Jessica told me herself. Last week at Starbucks. Thought it was hilarious that you were planning to divorce me after the gala. Said you'd been planning it for months. That was a lie. But Madison's expression told me it was close enough to the truth. Get out, I said. Go home, pack your things, and find somewhere else to live. The penthouse is in my name only. You have until Friday. This is my home too. No, it's not. Check the deed. Check the mortgage. Check the insurance. Your name isn't on any of it. Rick handed her another document. Prenuptial agreement, page 7. In case of adultery, the injured party retains all separate property. Alan's very good at planning ahead. Madison stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. I never signed this. Yes, you did. Right before our wedding. You said you didn't need to read it because you'd never cheat on me. I smiled. Oops. She stood up unsteadily. My lawyer will fight this. With what money? Your legal fees are going to be pretty steep once the criminal charges start flying. I hope David's planning to help with that because I'm certainly not. She walked toward the door, then turned back. I know you, Alan. You're not this cruel. This isn't you. You're right. The old me would have forgiven you, would have tried to work things out, would have let you walk all over me for the sake of our marriage. But the old me died last night when you said yes to David's proposal. The new me is someone you've never met before. After she left, Rick poured himself another cup of coffee and studied my face. You okay? That was pretty brutal. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. For the first time in months, I feel like myself again. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Mr. Foster, there's a guy in a suit down here asking questions about you. Says he's from Cross Industries' legal department. Want me to tell him you're not available? I showed the text to Rick, who grinned. They're moving fast. Let them. By the time their lawyers figure out what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. I walked to my window and looked down at the street, 40 floors below. A black sedan was parked across from my building, engine running. As I watched, Madison emerged from the building and got into the passenger seat. The sedan pulled away into traffic. Rick, I want you to follow that car. Find out where they're going, who they're meeting with. Document everything. You think they're planning something? I know they are. Madison's not the type to accept defeat gracefully, and David's ego won't let him go down without a fight. They're going to try to hit back. What do you want me to do if they try something illegal? I turned away from the window and smiled. Document it. We're going to need evidence for Phase 3. What's Phase 3? Total destruction. Not just their finances, their reputations, their relationships, their entire social structure. By the time I'm done, they won't be able to get a job managing a McDonald's in Peoria. Rick packed up his files and headed for the door. Alan, just remember, revenge is a dish best served cold, but it can also give you indigestion if you're not careful. After he left, I sat down at my computer and began researching David Cross's background, his business associates, his family, his college friends, his hobbies, his weaknesses. If he wanted to play hardball, I was going to show him what hardball really looked like. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Foster, this is James Shaw from Shaw Martinez and Associates. I represent Madison Foster in her divorce proceedings. She doesn't have divorce proceedings yet. She will by the end of the day. I'm calling to inform you that we'll be seeking emergency spousal support, half of all marital assets, and damages for emotional distress. I laughed. Good luck with that. You might want to read the prenup first. Prenups can be challenged, Mr. Foster, especially when there's evidence of coercion or fraud. There's no evidence of coercion or fraud because there wasn't any. But there is evidence of adultery, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Your client is going to have bigger problems than divorce proceedings very soon. I hung up and immediately called my own lawyer, Patricia Kim, a shark in designer suits who'd handled my business acquisitions for 5 years. Patricia, it's Alan Foster. I need you to file for divorce immediately. Adultery, irreconcilable differences, and breach of prenuptial agreement. Also, I want a restraining order. Restraining order? Has she threatened you? Not yet, but she will. And when she does, I want to be ready. By the end of the day, Madison had been served with divorce papers and a restraining order prohibiting her from entering my building or contacting me except through lawyers. David had been served with a subpoena for his financial records, and the SEC had opened a formal investigation into Cross Industries. I was just getting started. The next morning brought news that David Cross had called an emergency board meeting. According to my source, David's personal assistant Karen, who'd been feeding me information for weeks in exchange for a promise of a better job when the dust settled, the meeting was a disaster. He spent 2 hours screaming about corporate sabotage and hostile takeovers. Karen told me over coffee at a cafe 3 blocks from Cross Industries. The board members just sat there looking uncomfortable. When he started talking about hiring private investigators to, quote, neutralize the threat, 2 of them walked out. Neutralize the threat? His exact words. Mr. Foster, I think you should be careful. David's not thinking clearly right now. Karen was a smart woman in her 40s who'd watched David's erratic behavior escalate over the past year. She'd seen him screaming at employees, throwing things in his office, and making increasingly poor business decisions. The affair with Madison had made everything worse. What about Madison? Is she still coming to the office? She tried yesterday, but security turned her away. Her access card was deactivated. She caused quite a scene in the lobby. I handed Karen an envelope. There's a job offer from TechFlow Consulting. Same salary, better benefits, and you won't have to work for a man who's about to be indicted for embezzlement. Karen took the envelope gratefully. What do you need me to do? Nothing illegal. Just keep your eyes and ears open for the next few days. If David does anything threatening or dangerous, call me immediately. After Karen left, I drove to my old startup office, now the headquarters of TechFlow Consulting, the company I'd built from the ashes of my original business. My former CTO, Mike Chen, greeted me with a grin. "Alan, I heard you were stirring up trouble in the corporate world. Need any help?" Mike was one of the few people who knew the full extent of my wealth. He'd been with me since the beginning, and when I sold TechFlow Solutions, I'd set him up with his own company using the same name and client base. "Actually, yes. I need you to do some data recovery work." I handed him a hard drive that Rick had, quote, acquired from David's office during a late-night visit. This came from David Cross's personal computer. I need to know what's on it. Mike plugged the drive into his system and started running recovery software. "This is going to take a few hours. What am I looking for?" "Evidence of financial fraud, personal communications about the affair, anything that might be useful in court." While Mike worked, I drove to the gym where I'd been boxing for the past 2 years. My trainer, Eddie, was a former Golden Gloves champion who'd taught me how to channel my frustration into physical activity. "You look like you need to hit something," Eddie said when he saw me. "More than you know." I spent an hour working the heavy bag, imagining David's face with every punch. The physical exertion helped clear my head and focus my thoughts. When I was done, I felt calm and centered for the first time in days. As I was leaving the gym, I ran into someone I hadn't expected to see. David Cross. He was standing by my car in the parking lot, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't." I moved toward my car, but he stepped in front of me. "You're destroying innocent people, Foster. Madison doesn't deserve this. Madison made her choice. So did you. It was just intimacy. It didn't mean anything." I stopped and looked at him. "Just intimacy? Is that what you told her when you proposed? Was the engagement ring just intimacy too? The proposal was a mistake. I was drunk. I got carried away. It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "But it did happen. In front of 200 people, including me." David's face flushed red. "So, you decided to destroy my company? Ruin my life? Cost hundreds of people their jobs? I decided to stop pretending I was powerless. You and Madison spent months treating me like a joke. Now you know what the punchline feels like." He grabbed my arm. "This ends now. Call off your lawyers, stop the SEC investigation, and maybe we can work something out." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. "Take your hand off me." "Or what?" I smiled and drove my fist into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping for air, and I followed up with an uppercut that sent him sprawling across the hood of my car. "Or that," I said. David rolled off the hood and onto the ground, blood streaming from his nose. "You broke my nose!" "Good. Now it matches your company's stock price." I pulled up my phone and started recording. "Say something for the camera, David. Tell everyone how you feel about sleeping with other men's wives. Stop recording. Why? You didn't mind putting on a show at the gala. I thought you enjoyed public performances." David struggled to his feet, holding his nose. "This isn't over, Foster." "You're right. It's not." I stopped recording and got into my car. "Give my regards to Madison. Tell her I said congratulations on the engagement." I drove away, leaving David bleeding in the parking lot. 20 minutes later, I uploaded the video to a private YouTube channel and sent the link to Jessica, Tanya, and Priya, Madison's gossip crew from the gala. The video went viral in their social circle within hours. My phone rang as I was driving home. Rick's number. "Alan, you need to see this. Madison and David just left a law office downtown. Shaw, Martinez and Associates. They were inside for 2 hours. That's Madison's divorce lawyer. Not just divorce. I did some digging on James Shaw. He specializes in asset forfeiture and criminal defense. They're not just planning to divorce you. They're planning to have you arrested." "On what charges?" "I don't know yet, but Shaw's got connections with the DA's office. If they can manufacture evidence of corporate fraud or insider trading, they might be able to freeze your assets while the investigation proceeds." I pulled over and thought about this. It was actually a smart move. If they could tie up my money in legal proceedings, they'd level the playing field and buy themselves time to regroup. "Rick, I need you to do something for me. Contact Patricia Kim and tell her to transfer all of my liquid assets to offshore accounts immediately. If they want to play dirty, I'll show them what dirty really looks like. Are you sure about this? Once you start moving money offshore, there's no going back. The feds will assume you're guilty of something. Let them assume. By the time they figure out what's really happening, it'll be too late. I hung up and drove home, already planning my next move. If Madison and David wanted to escalate this into a legal war, I was happy to oblige. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was playing by the same rules they were. I wasn't. When I got home, Tony was waiting for me in the lobby with a concerned expression. Mr. Foster, there were some men here asking questions about you. Said they were from the police, but they didn't show badges when I asked. What kind of questions? About your schedule, your visitors, your financial situation. I told them I don't discuss residence with strangers, but they seemed very interested in your business activities. I handed Tony a business card. If anyone else comes around asking questions, call this number immediately. Don't talk to anyone without a lawyer present. Are you in some kind of trouble, Mr. Foster? Nothing I can't handle, Tony. But things might get a little complicated around here for the next few weeks. I took the elevator up to my penthouse and immediately activated my security system's recording function. If Madison and David were planning to frame me for something, I wanted documentation of everything that happened in my home. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Data recovery complete. You need to see this immediately. I drove back to Mike's office where he handed me a thick folder of printed documents. Alan, this is bigger than embezzlement. David Cross has been running a Ponzi scheme through Cross Industries for the past 18 months. He's been using new investor money to pay returns to existing investors, while siphoning millions into personal accounts. I flipped through the documents. Bank transfers, falsified financial statements, emails discussing how to hide the missing money. It was a federal crime that could put David in prison for 20 years. There's more, Mike said. Madison wasn't just sleeping with him. She was helping him cook the books. Her signature is on half of these fraudulent documents. I sat down heavily in Mike's chair. This changed everything. Madison and David weren't just adulterers and embezzlers. They were major financial criminals who'd stolen millions from investors. Mike, make copies of everything and put the originals in a safe deposit box. Then call the FBI. The FBI? This is way beyond SEC jurisdiction now. We're talking about mail fraud, wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. They're both looking at decades in federal prison. As I drove home, I realized that my personal revenge had accidentally uncovered a much larger crime. Madison and David weren't just going to lose their reputations and their jobs. They were going to lose their freedom. But first, I had to make sure they didn't take me down with them. The FBI raid on Cross Industries happened at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. I watched it from my office window, drinking coffee and feeling a deep sense of satisfaction as federal agents carried boxes of evidence out of the building across the street. Karen called me 20 minutes later, breathless with excitement. Mr. Foster, they arrested David right in his office, and they have a warrant for Madison too. Where is Madison? Nobody knows. She didn't come in yesterday, and her apartment is empty. The FBI agent seemed very interested in finding her. Madison was running. That was smart. It bought her time to destroy evidence and maybe flee the country. But it was also desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. My phone rang. Patricia Kim, my lawyer. Alan, we have a problem. The FBI wants to interview you about your relationship with Cross Industries and your recent stock transactions. When? This afternoon. They're treating you as a witness right now, but that could change quickly if they think you were involved in the fraud. I wasn't involved in any fraud. I know that, but you need to be careful. Your timing in pulling out of Cross Industries looks suspicious. The FBI might think you had inside information about the Ponzi scheme. I met with FBI agent Sarah Martinez at 2 p.m. in Patricia's office. Martinez was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd clearly done her homework on my financial dealings. Mr. Foster, can you explain why you liquidated your position in Cross Industries on the same night your wife announced her engagement to David Cross? I was angry. My wife humiliated me publicly, so I made an emotional financial decision. It wasn't based on any inside information about illegal activities. You liquidated $357 million in assets in a single night. That seems like an extreme emotional response. Patricia leaned forward. My client's personal financial decisions aren't criminal, Agent Martinez. He had every legal right to sell his investments. Of course. But the timing is interesting. Mr. Foster, were you aware that your wife was involved in falsifying financial documents at Cross Industries? I suspected she was having an affair, but I had no knowledge of any financial crimes until my private investigator discovered evidence of embezzlement. I handed Agent Martinez a copy of the bank statements Rick had found. This is what I knew about. Small-scale embezzlement to fund their affair. I had no idea about the larger Ponzi scheme. Agent Martinez studied the documents. When did you first become aware of these transfers? 3 days ago. I immediately reported it to the SEC. And you hired a private investigator to follow your wife? To document her adultery for divorce proceedings. The financial crimes were an unexpected discovery. The interview lasted 2 hours. Agent Martinez was thorough but not hostile, and by the end, I got the impression that she believed my story. The FBI was focused on David and Madison, not on me. After the FBI left, Patricia poured herself a drink. You're in the clear for now, but stay available. They might have more questions as the investigation develops. What about Madison? Any word on where she is? Officially, no. Unofficially, there are reports that she tried to board a flight to Switzerland yesterday, but was turned away at the gate. Her passport has been flagged. I drove home through downtown Chicago, passing the Cross Industries building where news vans were parked and reporters were doing live broadcasts about the corporate fraud scandal. The local news was calling it the biggest financial crime in Chicago history. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You destroyed everything I cared about. Now I'm going to destroy you. M. Madison was making threats now. That was a mistake. It gave me legal ammunition and suggested she was getting desperate. I forwarded the text to Patricia and to Agent Martinez, then called Rick. Madison's threatening me. I need to know where she is. I'm already on it. She's staying at a motel on the south side, under a fake name. But Alan, she's not alone. David made bail this morning, and they're together. David made bail? I thought federal fraud charges weren't bailable. His lawyer argued that he wasn't a flight risk because his passport was confiscated. The judge set bail at $5 million. Where did he get $5 million? That's what I'm trying to figure out. His known assets were frozen, but somehow he came up with the money. I thought about this. David was broke, his company was destroyed, and his personal accounts were frozen. But someone had posted $5 million to get him out of jail. Someone with deep pockets and a vested interest in keeping him free. Rick, I want you to find out who posted his bail, and I want surveillance on that motel. If Madison and David are planning something, I want to know about it before they act. That evening, I attended a charity dinner at the Palmer House Hotel. It was a social event I'd committed to months earlier, before my life imploded, but I decided to go anyway. I wanted to see how Chicago's social elite would react to the scandal. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Conversation stopped when I entered the room. People stared, whispered, and pointed. I was no longer Alan Foster, the quiet tech entrepreneur. I was Alan Foster, the man whose wife had been arrested for federal fraud. Jessica, Tanya, and Priya were at a table near the bar, and they made no effort to hide their hostility when they saw me. Look who decided to show his face, Jessica said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. The man who destroyed Madison's life because he couldn't handle being dumped. I walked over to their table and smiled. Hello, ladies. How are you enjoying the charity dinner? I hope you're donating generously to help victims of financial fraud. You're not funny, Alan, Tanya said. Madison is facing 20 years in prison because of you. Madison is facing 20 years in prison because she helped David Cross steal millions of dollars from investors. I didn't make her commit federal crimes. She was manipulated. Priya stood up, swaying slightly from too much wine. David took advantage of her. Is that what she told you? That she was a victim? I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo Rick had taken of Madison and David at a restaurant 6 months earlier. This was taken before the Ponzi scheme started. They were planning this together from the beginning. The three women stared at the photo. In it, Madison and David were clearly intimate, holding hands across the table and looking very much like co-conspirators. You hired someone to spy on her, Jessica said. That's sick. I hired someone to document her adultery. The criminal conspiracy was a bonus. I put my phone away and looked at each of them. You ladies spent months mocking me, calling me useless, laughing about how Madison was going to trade up from her loser husband. How does it feel to know you were cheering for a federal criminal? Tanya threw her wine in my face. The red liquid splashed across my shirt and dripped onto the floor, causing a scene that drew the attention of everyone in the room. Feel better? I asked, wiping wine from my face with a napkin. You deserve worse than that, Tanya said. Maybe. But at least I'm not going to prison. I walked away, leaving them to explain to the other guests why they'd just assaulted someone at a charity dinner. The incident would be all over Chicago's social media by morning, further cementing my reputation as the wronged husband who'd exposed a massive fraud. When I got home, Tony met me in the lobby with a concerned expression. Mr. Foster, there was a woman here earlier trying to get up to your apartment. She claimed to be your wife, but when I asked for ID, she ran. What did she look like? Blonde, about 5'6", wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. She seemed nervous, kept looking over her shoulder. Madison had tried to get into my apartment. That was either very brave or very stupid, considering she was a federal fugitive with an outstanding warrant. I took the elevator to my penthouse and immediately checked my security system. The cameras had recorded Madison in the lobby at 3:47 p.m., just as Tony described. But they'd also recorded something else, a man in a dark jacket following her at a distance. David was with her, staying out of sight but close enough to help if needed. They were working together, planning something that required access to my apartment. I called Rick and sent him the security footage. They're planning to break in. Tonight, probably. I need backup. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But Alan, if they're desperate enough to commit breaking and entering, they might be desperate enough to do something violent. Let them come. I'm ready. I spent the next hour preparing my apartment for unwelcome visitors. I activated every security camera, set up motion sensors in the hallway, and made sure my phone was programmed to call 911 with a single button press. At 11:30 p.m., the motion sensors triggered. 2 figures were in the hallway outside my apartment, working on the lock with professional-grade tools. I called 911, then called Rick, then settled in to watch the show on my security monitors. Madison and David had come to destroy me. Instead, they were about to destroy themselves. The lockpicking took them 12 minutes. I watched on my security monitors as Madison and David worked quietly in the hallway, their faces illuminated by the green glow of the emergency exit sign. David was doing the technical work while Madison acted as lookout, both of them clearly nervous but determined. When they finally got the door open, they stepped into my apartment and immediately triggered the motion-activated lights I'd programmed to flash in a strobing pattern. The effect was disorienting, exactly what I'd intended. What the hell? David stumbled backward, shielding his eyes from the pulsing lights. I stepped out of the kitchen where I'd been waiting and smiled. Welcome to my home. I wasn't expecting visitors, but I prepared anyway. Madison spun around, her face pale in the flickering light. Alan, we need to talk. No, we don't. What we need is for you to explain to the police why you just broke into my apartment. The police? David looked around frantically. You called the cops? 15 minutes ago. They should be here any moment. That was a lie. I'd told the 911 operator it was a non-emergency situation and asked them to respond quietly. I wanted time to have a conversation with my uninvited guests before the authorities arrived. Madison stepped forward, her hands raised peacefully. Alan, please. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to go to prison for 20 years. You stole millions of dollars from investors, Madison. Some of those people lost their retirement savings because of you and David. I didn't know what David was doing. He told you the transfers were legal. I laughed. Madison, I have your emails. You knew exactly what you were doing. You helped him create fake financial statements, you signed fraudulent documents, and you personally moved money between accounts. You weren't a victim. You were a co-conspirator. David moved to my left, trying to flank me. I kept both of them in my peripheral vision while staying close to the kitchen, where I had several potential weapons within reach. Foster, you destroyed my company and my life because you couldn't handle losing your wife to a better man, David said. This is all about your wounded ego. My wounded ego? David, you proposed to my wife at a corporate gala in front of 200 people. You called me broke and useless. You humiliated me publicly and then expected me to just take it quietly. So you decided to ruin us both? I decided to stop being a victim. The financial crimes were your choice, not mine. Madison was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Alan, I loved you once. Doesn't that mean anything? Once. Past tense. You stopped loving me the moment you decided I wasn't successful enough for your ambitions. That's not true. Then why did you tell Jessica that you were embarrassed to be married to me? Why did you tell Tanya that you were planning to divorce me after the gala? Why did you open a secret bank account and start stealing money from your own company? She had no answer for that. David was getting agitated, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. This is pointless. We didn't come here to apologize. Then why did you come here? To make you an offer, Madison said. We have evidence that you manipulated Cross Industries' stock prices through insider trading. We can make that evidence disappear if you help us. I raised an eyebrow. Help you how? Testify that I was coerced by David. Say that he threatened me, forced me to sign documents I didn't understand. Help me get a reduced sentence. And what do I get in return? David pulled a manila envelope from his jacket. These are copies of your trading records, manipulated to show that you had advanced knowledge of the Ponzi scheme. If we give these to the FBI, you'll be charged as a co-conspirator. I took the envelope and examined the documents. They were good. Professional forgeries that would be difficult to disprove without extensive forensic accounting. You're trying to blackmail me. We're trying to survive, Madison said. David has connections in the federal prison system. He says I won't last 6 months if I go in as a white-collar criminal. So you want me to lie under oath to help you get a lighter sentence? Yes. I walked to my fireplace and tossed the envelope into the flames. The forged documents curled and burned, filling the room with acrid smoke. Alan, what are you doing? Madison screamed. I'm calling your bluff. Those documents are worthless. The FBI has already examined my trading records and cleared me as a witness, not a suspect. David's face went red with rage. You arrogant bastard! You think you're so smart! He lunged at me, swinging wildly with his fists. I sidestepped and drove my knee into his stomach, doubling him over. When he straightened up, I hit him with a right cross that sent him sprawling across my coffee table. Stay down, David. You're not a fighter. He struggled to his feet, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. I'm going to kill you. No, you're not. You're going to go to federal prison for 10 to 20 years, and you're going to think about this moment every day while you're there. Madison was sobbing hysterically now. Please, Alan. I'll do anything. I'll give you everything I have. I'll disappear. I'll never bother you again. Just help me avoid prison. Madison, you humiliated me in front of 200 people. You stole millions of dollars from innocent investors. You broke into my home and tried to blackmail me. Why would I help you? Because you loved me once. I loved the woman I thought you were. But that woman never existed, did she? You were always this person. Selfish, greedy, willing to destroy anyone who got in your way. The elevator dinged in the hallway. The police had finally arrived. That's your cue to leave, I said. You can walk out now and turn yourselves in, or you can wait for the cops to arrest you for breaking and entering. David and Madison looked at each other, communicating silently. Then David grabbed a heavy glass sculpture from my bookshelf and hurled it at my head. I ducked, and the sculpture smashed against the wall behind me, sending glass shards flying across the room. That was assault with a deadly weapon, I said calmly. The security cameras recorded everything. The apartment door burst open and 3 police officers rushed in, guns drawn. Chicago PD! Everyone on the ground! Madison immediately dropped to her knees, hands raised. David stood frozen for a moment, then slowly lowered himself to the floor. Officers, I'm Alan Foster. I called 911 about a break-in. These 2 people forced their way into my apartment and threatened me. The lead officer, a sergeant in his 50s, looked around at the scene. Broken glass, overturned furniture, Madison crying on the floor, David bleeding from his forehead. Are you injured, Mr. Foster? No, but they destroyed some of my property and attempted to assault me with that sculpture. The sergeant nodded to his officers, who began handcuffing Madison and David. You have the right to remain silent, one officer began. This is a mistake, Madison screamed. He's the criminal. He manipulated stock prices. He destroyed an innocent company. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," the sergeant said. "You can explain your side of the story at the station." As they led Madison and David away, Madison turned back to me one last time. "This isn't over, Alan. I'll find a way to make you pay." "You already tried," I said. "It didn't work out very well for you." After the police left, I surveyed the damage to my apartment. Broken glass, overturned furniture, scuff marks on the walls. It would take a few days to clean up, but it was worth it to see the look of desperation on their faces when they realized their blackmail scheme had failed. Rick arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of expensive whiskey and a satisfied grin. I heard it on the police scanner: breaking and entering, attempted assault, destruction of property. They just added 3 more felonies to their federal charges. How long do you think they'll get? With the Ponzi scheme, the embezzlement, and now this, Madison's looking at 15 to 20 years. David might get 25 to life if they can prove he was the ringleader. We sat in my living room, drinking whiskey and watching the late-night news coverage of the arrest. The reporter was standing outside my building, describing how the estranged wife of tech entrepreneur Alan Foster was arrested for breaking into his penthouse apartment. "You know what the best part is?" Rick said. "They did this to themselves. You didn't frame them, you didn't plant evidence, you didn't manipulate them into committing crimes. You just stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own actions. They thought I was weak," I said. "They thought I'd just take their abuse and never fight back. Big mistake." My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez. "Mr. Foster, thank you for your cooperation tonight. The additional charges will be very helpful in our prosecution. We may need you to testify, but you're no longer considered a person of interest." I showed the text to Rick, who raised his glass in a toast. "To Alan Foster, the man who proved that revenge is a dish best served with federal prison sentences." I clinked my glass against his and smiled. "To new beginnings." Outside my window, Chicago sparkled in the darkness, full of possibilities I'd never imagined when I was married to Madison. Tomorrow, I would start rebuilding my life. But tonight, I was content to savor the satisfaction of watching my enemies destroy themselves through their own greed and desperation. The quiet, unassuming husband they'd dismissed as weak and useless had turned out to be their worst nightmare. A man with unlimited resources, perfect patience, and absolutely nothing left to lose. 6 months later, I was sitting in the federal courthouse watching Madison and David receive their sentences. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly been disgusted by the evidence presented during the trial, showed no mercy. "Mr. Cross, you orchestrated a sophisticated Ponzi scheme that defrauded investors of over $40 million. Your actions destroyed the retirement savings of dozens of families and caused immeasurable harm to the financial community. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison." David's face went white. His lawyer had argued for 10 years, claiming cooperation with authorities and acceptance of responsibility. It hadn't worked. "Mrs. Foster, while you may have been initially manipulated by Mr. Cross, the evidence shows that you became a willing and enthusiastic participant in this criminal enterprise. Your betrayal of your fiduciary duties and your attempts to obstruct justice demonstrate a complete lack of remorse. I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison." Madison collapsed in her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Her lawyer put a comforting hand on her shoulder, but there was nothing more he could do. I felt no satisfaction watching them receive their sentences. The anger that had driven me for months had burned itself out during the trial, replaced by a cold sense of justice finally being served. As the marshals led them away in shackles, Madison looked back at me one last time. Her face was streaked with tears, her hair disheveled, her expensive clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," but I felt nothing. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me with cameras and microphones. "Mr. Foster, how do you feel about your ex-wife's sentence?" "Justice has been served. The victims of their crimes can finally have some closure. Do you think the sentences were appropriate?" "That's not for me to decide." The judge heard all the evidence and made her decision based on the law. "What's next for you?" I looked up at the Chicago skyline, where construction cranes were building new towers that would reshape the city's future. I'm moving forward, starting fresh, building something better. That evening, I had dinner with Rick at a restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. The summer sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. "So what's the plan now?" Rick asked. "You've got more money than you can spend in 10 lifetimes. No wife, no enemies. What does Alan Foster do for an encore?" I've been thinking about that, I said. I want to start a foundation, help victims of financial fraud, provide legal assistance for people who can't afford to fight back against corporate criminals. The Madison Foster Foundation for Fraud Victims? I laughed. I was thinking something more subtle. The Second Chance Foundation, maybe. I like it. Very poetic. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen, David's former assistant who now worked for my consulting company. Mr. Foster, there's a woman here who says she needs to speak with you urgently. She won't give her name, but she says it's about Madison. I showed the text to Rick, who frowned. Madison's in federal prison. What could this be about? Only one way to find out. We drove to my office, where Karen was waiting with a nervous-looking woman in her 30s. She had short brown hair, tired eyes, and the kind of haunted expression that comes from carrying a terrible secret. Mr. Foster? My name is Lisa Chen. I was David Cross's accountant before the FBI investigation. What can I do for you, Miss Chen? There's something you need to know about Madison, something that didn't come out during the trial. She handed me a thick folder of documents. Madison wasn't just helping David with the Ponzi scheme. She was planning to have you killed. I sat down heavily, the folder suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Killed? She hired someone, a man named Vincent Torres. He's a professional, very expensive, very discreet. The plan was to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Rick leaned forward. How do you know this? I handled the payments. Madison thought she was being clever, routing the money through shell companies and offshore accounts, but I kept copies of everything. I opened the folder and found bank records, wire transfers, and email communications between Madison and Torres. The evidence was overwhelming. Madison had paid Torres $500,000 to murder me. Why didn't this come out during the trial? Because Torres was arrested in Miami on unrelated charges 2 days before Madison was supposed to give him the final payment. The FBI never connected him to the Cross Industries case. Why are you telling me this now? Lisa's voice shook as she answered. Because Torres was released from prison last week, and, according to my sources, Madison contacted him from federal prison. She wants to finish what she started. I felt a chill run down my spine. Even from behind bars, Madison was still trying to destroy me. What do you want me to do with this information? I asked. Take it to the FBI. Torres is a dangerous man with nothing to lose. If Madison's still paying him, he'll come after you. I called Agent Martinez, who arrived at my office within an hour. She studied the documents with growing alarm. Mr. Foster, this is credible evidence of a murder-for-hire conspiracy. We need to put you in protective custody immediately. For how long? Until we can arrest Torres and add these charges to Madison's case. I thought about this. Protective custody meant hiding, running, living in fear. It meant letting Madison win, even from prison. No, I said. I'm not going into hiding. Mr. Foster, this man is a professional killer. He's not going to give up just because you're prepared for him. Then let him come, but I'm not running. Agent Martinez tried to argue, but I'd made up my mind. I'd spent too many years being afraid of Madison's threats and manipulations. I wasn't going to start running now. That night I returned to my penthouse and activated every security system I had. Motion sensors, cameras, alarms, reinforced doors, bulletproof windows. If Torres wanted to kill me, he'd have to work for it. Rick insisted on staying with me, along with 2 private security guards he'd hired. We turned my apartment into a fortress and waited. Torres made his move 3 days later. I was in my office at 2 a.m., working on plans for the Second Chance Foundation, when the motion sensors detected movement in the hallway. The security cameras showed a man in black tactical gear, moving with the fluid grace of a professional. He's here, I told Rick, who was monitoring the security feeds from the kitchen. I see him. He's good. Disabled the elevator cameras and the stairwell alarms, but he doesn't know about the backup systems. I called 911 and reported an armed intruder, then settled in to wait. Torres was methodical, taking his time to bypass each security measure. It took him 20 minutes to reach my front door. When he finally entered my apartment, he found me sitting in my living room, hands visible, no weapons in sight. Vincent Torres, I presume. He was a compact man in his 40s, with cold eyes and steady hands. His gun was pointed at my chest, finger on the trigger. Madison sends her regards. he said in a voice devoid of emotion. Madison's in federal prison. She can't afford to pay you anymore. She paid me enough up front. This is about professional reputation now. Your professional reputation is about to include killing an unarmed man in his own home while the police are on their way. Torres smiled. The police won't get here in time. Maybe not, but they'll get here eventually, and when they do, they'll find all the evidence they need to connect you to Madison's murder conspiracy. What evidence? I gestured toward the security cameras mounted throughout the room. Every word of this conversation is being recorded and transmitted to FBI servers in real time. Agent Martinez is probably watching us right now. Torres's confidence wavered slightly. He hadn't expected that level of surveillance. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your phone. You should have 17 missed calls from your contact at the Miami Police Department. They found your fingerprints on the murder weapon from the job that got you arrested. Your former cellmate is testifying that you confessed to killing a federal judge. That was a complete lie, but Torres didn't know that. His eyes flicked toward his phone, and in that moment of distraction, Rick emerged from the kitchen with a shotgun. Drop the weapon! Torres spun around, but Rick was already firing. The blast caught Torres in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his gun flying across the room. The apartment door burst open, and a SWAT team poured in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Suspect down! Suspect down! Torres was writhing on the floor, clutching his shoulder and screaming in pain. The paramedics arrived within minutes and stabilized him before the police took him into custody. Agent Martinez appeared at my side as the chaos died down. Are you all right, Mr. Foster? I'm fine. Did you get everything you need? More than enough. Torres just confessed to 3 murders while the paramedics were working on him. He's going away forever. And Madison? Conspiracy to commit murder while incarcerated. She just added another 20 years to her sentence. I walked to my window and looked out over the Chicago skyline. Dawn was breaking over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. It's over, Rick said, joining me at the window. Yes, I agreed. It's finally over. 6 months later, I was standing in the lobby of the Second Chance Foundation, watching victims of financial fraud receive legal assistance and emotional support. The foundation had helped recover over $10 million for people who'd been cheated by corporate criminals. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Madison Foster found dead in federal prison. The article said she'd been killed by another inmate during a fight over commissary privileges. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, no relief. Madison had become irrelevant to my life the moment I decided to stop being her victim. That evening, I had dinner with Patricia Kim, who'd become more than just my lawyer over the past year. We talked about the foundation, about our plans for the future, about building something meaningful from the ashes of my old life. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Everything that happened? I thought about the question as I watched the sun set over Lake Michigan. No, I said finally. Madison and David made their choices. They chose greed over integrity, betrayal over loyalty, crime over honesty. I just made sure they faced the consequences. And now? Now I'm building something better. Something that helps people